Welcome to the Unfiltered Political Lens Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the military-industrial complex, how war profits from fuel, corruption, and the endless conflict. We're going to hop right into it as we always do. In a world where headlines shift by the hour and conflicts seem to emerge without warning, many are left asking a deeper question. Who truly benefits from war? Tonight we step beyond the surface narratives and into the machinery behind the global conflict. This is not just about politics or defense. It's about power, profit, influence, and the systems that some argue thrives on instability itself. From backroom deals to billion-dollar contracts, from fear-driven narratives and policy decisions that shape entire generations, we're diving deep into the structures that operates behind the scenes. Welcome to a raw, unfiltered look at the military-industrial complex, expanded, exposed, and impossible to ignore. There is a quiet engine that hums beneath the noise of political speeches, breaking news alerts, and patriotic slogans. A system so deeply embedded into the fabric of modern society that most people never stop to question it. The military industrial complex is not just a phrase, it's a living, evolving network of defense contractors, lobbyists, intelligence agencies, financial institutions, and think tanks, media influence, and political power structures whose interests often align with peace but with perpetual preparedness and at times conflict. And the uncomfortable truth is that war for some is not just a tragedy, it is a business model, a revenue stream, and in some cases, a strategic necessity to sustain growth and influence. To understand it, you have to look beyond the battlefield and into the boardrooms. Every missile launched and every drone deployed, every armored vehicle manufactured, every cybersecurity contract rewarded represents billions of dollars circulating through a tightly interconnected system. This is not accidental, it's structural. Defense budgets increase year after year, often justified by evolving threats, emerging global tensions, or the need to maintain dominance. But what happens when those increases become expected? When entire industries depend on sustained or growing conflicts to justify their existence. Think about the scale. Governments allocate enormous portions of taxpayer money toward defense spending, often more than healthcare, education, and infrastructure combined. These funds are then distributed through contracts to private corporations that specialize in weapons manufacturing, logistics, intelligence systems, surveillance technologies, and more. These corporations in turn invest heavily in lobbying to ensure continued funding, favorable regulations, and long term contracts. It becomes a feedback loop. Policy drives profit, and profit influences that policy. The cycle is disturbingly consistent and historically repeatable. A threat emerges or it's amplified. It may be real, exaggerated, or strategically framed. The fear spreads across the public through media coverage and political rhetoric. The language becomes urgent and national security, imminent danger, global stability. Political leaders step forward promising the strength and protection and decisive action. Emergency measures are justified and the budgets are approved, and beyond the scene, contracts are signed often quickly, often with limited transparency, and the deals are made and the stocks surge. Investors take notice, and the same companies that manufacture the weapons provide the intelligence systems or the support military logistics, which begin to see their profits rise dramatically. But it doesn't stop there. The influence extends into policy creation itself. Lobbyists representing defense interests work closely with lawmakers to shape legislation. Campaign contributions flow into political races, ensuring that candidates who support strong defense spending and, by the extension, industry growth remain competitive and influential. And then there's a revolving door, a phenomenon where individuals move between government positions and private sector roles within defense companies. A policymaker today may become a defense executive tomorrow, and vice versa. The blurring lines of roles, it raises serious questions about objectivity, accountability, and whose interests are truly being served. Here's where the conversation also deepens. It's not always about international or intentional corruption in the traditional sense. It's about the incentives systems don't need malicious intent to produce problematic outcomes. They only need misaligned incentives. When the system rewards escalation more than de-escalation, conflict becomes more likely. When peace leads to reduced spending and fewer contracts and shrinking profits, it becomes less attractive within the system. And when war or heightened tensions leads to economic gain for powerful entities, the motivation to sustain the environment increases, even if subtly, even if indirectly. However, media plays a role as well. Narratives shape perception, and the framing of conflicts and the emphasis on threats, the reputation of certain viewpoints all contribute to public opinion. And public opinion, in turn, influences political decision making. When citizens are consistently exposed to messaging that emphasizes danger and urgency, support for military action becomes easier to generate. This doesn't mean all media is controlled or coordinated, but it does mean the ecosystem can reinforce itself, especially when access to information is filtered through institutional lenses. Meanwhile, the human cost remains staggering and often underrepresented. In these calculations, lives lost on battlefields, civilians displaced from their homes, entire communities destroyed, and generations impacted by trauma, instability, and economic collapse. Veterans returning home with their physical and psychological wounds that last a lifetime. These are not abstract numbers, and they are real people, real stories, and real consequences. And yet, in the machinery of geopolitics and profit, they can become a secondary consideration. The entire regions can be destabilized for decades, and the infrastructure collapses. Power vacuums emerge, and new conflicts arise from the ashes of old ones. And in many cases, the same systems that contribute to the initial conflict are then involved in reconstruction efforts, security contracts, and ongoing military presence. The cycle doesn't just continue, it evolves and it expands. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of the military industrial complex is how normalized this has all become. War is often framed as an inevitable, a consistent, and human history. Military spending is treated as untouchable, immune to the scrutiny applied to other areas of government expenditure. Questioning it can be seen as naive, unrealistic, or even unpatriotic. Over time, this normalization dulls the critical thinking. It conditions the public to accept a state of constant tension and the status quo. And yet, history also shows us that systems can change, but only when they are understood. Awareness disrupts complacency, and questioning does not equal disloyalty, it equals engagement. It means asking deeper questions like, why do conflicts start? Who benefits from them financially, politically, or strategically? Are there alternative paths that are being overlooked because they don't align with existing incentives? What would a system look like if it truly prioritized long term peace over a short term gain? The true national strength should not be measured solely by military capabilities, but by the reliance, diplomacy, economic stability, and the well being of its citizens. A powerful nation is not just one that can wage war, but one that can prevent it, resolve it, and rise above the forces that profit from it. This is not an easy conversation, and it challenges institutions, traditions, and long standing beliefs. It requires confronting, however, uncomfortable truths and acknowledging complexity. but it is necessary because as long as war remains profitable, there will always be forces, whether intentional or systemic, that sustain it. And as long as there are public, as long as the public remains disengaged and distracted or even divided, meaningful change becomes increasingly difficult to obtain. The future depends on our awareness, on our accountability, on demanding the transparency in how decisions are made and who benefits from them. Because at the end of the day, the question is not just about war, it's about the kind of world we are willing to accept and the systems we're willing to challenge. The question is, how long are we willing to let it continue? If this made you think or question yourself or see things from a different perspective, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I want to thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Unfiltered Political Lens Podcast. As always, we will see you in the next episode. Peace.